Welcome back everyone. My name is Sagar and in this video we will be working with databases. And for Android we have Room, which is a part of Jetpack libraries and it is a wrapper around SQLite. So that means today we will be starting our very first mega project, and today we will be storing our data using our Room database, and we will be using MVVM architecture to create our project. So without making any further ado, let's get started. So today we will be starting our project based videos, and for that we will be creating a new project. So just open your Android Studio, and by default it will just open your previous project. So we have to first cancel that process. So just wait for it to open it. So at the time of this video I am using this Android Studio Electric Eel version. And now you can see it is just opening my previous project, so we have to click on this cancel option and it will just cancel the process, and we have to now create a new project. So just wait, and it will just open a new prompt, and here you can see, so we have to create a new project, and it will be just a empty screen. So you can see empty activity, click on next, and we have to name it with some unique name. So today we will be using Room database with MVVM architecture, and this is our first project video. So what we are gonna name this project is Room MVVM, and that's it. Now you can see the language is Kotlin and API level is 24. So click on finish, and it will just take a little bit time. So while this process is taking time, now let me just tell you about a Room database. So apps that handle non-trivial amount of structured data can benefit greatly from persisting that data locally. So that means you can just store your data locally in your device, and that is the benefit of Android applications, that you can also store data from your network, from outside of your device, that means in some cloud or anywhere else, but you can also store data locally in your device. The most common use case is to catch relevant pieces of data so that when the device cannot access the network, the user can still browse them while they are offline. So that is the most common use of using a Room database, that you can just store your data locally, and when there is a no internet connection, then you can just access that data. The Room persistent library provide an abstraction layer over SQLite. So we already learned about SQLite commands in our very first video. So first of all you have to learn about some basic SQL commands, and this Room allow fluent database access while harnessing the full power of SQLite. So in particular, Room provides some specific benefits. First of all, compile time verification of SQL queries. So when we were writing our SQL queries, then we have to, then at the time of compilation we don't know whether our query was correct or not. But this Room provides us compile time verification of SQL queries. And the second point is convenience annotation that minimize repetitive and error-prone boilerplate code. So we have to use annotations in Kotlin, and we will be just minimizing our repetition of code. And the third point is streamline database migration path. So if we are migrating from one database to another, then we can easily do that with using this Room database. So first of all, we have to set up the Room database inside of our application, and to use Room in your app, you have to add the dependencies, and that means we have to add some implementations inside of our Gradle files. So this is build.gradle module application. So this is our Gradle file for application module, and inside this, here inside of this dependency block, you can see there are already some dependencies, and we have to add some new one, and we will be adding here. So how can we get the dependencies? So for that you have to go to your browser and search for this thing. So you can just go to the official documentation of Android. This is developer.android.com, and after that you can just get this part training slash data storage, and inside this, now you will see we are here. So we have to add this Groovy dependencies because we are using here Groovy. Okay, so here you can see this is our implementation. This is a dependency block, and we don't need all the implementation. We will be just using these. So we need this also, this implementation, and this, and we will be also getting this capped. So this capped means Kotlin annotation processing tool, and let me just copy them here. And now you can just click on this sync now. Okay, we are getting this error, and I think that is because we also have to add here a plugin for this cap. So we can also search that in our browser. So we can just write here capt plugin Android. I think we have to go here, but I'm not sure. You can just search on the internet if you want the exact and updated plugin. Okay, this is the thing. We have to add this ID and it will be inside of this plugins block. Okay, so we are gonna add it here. Okay, it is still giving us an error. And now you can see the request of this plugin could not be satisfied because the plugin is already on the class path with an unknown version. Okay, okay, we have to search for anything else here, and I think we should go for some Android documentation one. Okay, we have to use this Kotlin capped, and here you can see we have to use this Kotlin capped, and we have to remove this version. Let's just give it a try if we have to use this Kotlin capped or Kotlin hyphen capped or this Kotlin dot cap. Okay, we have to use here. Try again. And now you can see here the build is successful. So that means we just got the right implementation and right plugin. So let me just close this page. So now let's just move ahead with our room database. So first of all, inside our room database, we have three major components. So the first one is the database class that holds the database and serves as the main access point for the underlying connection to your app's persistent data. Here you can see this is our database that will be directly talking to our apps persisted data that will be stored inside of your device. And after that, we have also these entities. So these are data entities, and this will be just a normal data class of Kotlin that represents table in your apps database. So suppose we are just creating a data class in Kotlin and that contains two fields, that is name and suppose phone number. So these will be two rows for our database. Okay, so there is a database table, and if you don't know about database, SQL database, then first of all learn that thing from our first video. So these data classes will work as our tables in database, and after that we have our DAO. So this is DAO, data access objects, that provide method that you can use to query, update, insert and delete data in the database. So using this DAO, so we have this DAO objects, DAO, and using this we can perform our CRUD operations. So CRUD means create, read, update and delete. So after this, the database class provides your app with instance of DAOs associated with that database. In turn, the app can use the DAOs to retrieve data from the database as instance of the associated data entity objects. So this DAO will be provided using our room database, and this entity will be just a part of our database. Okay. The app can also use the defined data entities to update rows from the corresponding table or to create new rows for insertion. So we can just pass the data object of these entities and we can just pass it to our DAO and we can update our table. Okay. So first of all, we have to create this entity because these are the things that we will be using inside of our DAOs and also inside of our database. Okay. So first of all, we have to create entity, and as I said, entity is just a data class. So we also have to use here MVVM architecture, and I will be also explaining that thing in detail. But here, let me just show a quick implementation. So first of all, we have to create here a new package because we have to also separate here things, and here you can either create a data package or you can also create a DB package, but here we will be only working with our database, so I'm going to create here DB. And inside this, first of all, either you can create a new package that will be your entity, or you can just create here a class, because we have only one table for this project, so we will be only creating one class, and that will be our data class. So data class, and suppose this is a note. So here we will be just implementing a note. So suppose there is a note that the user is entering, and we have to store that note inside of the local database of that phone. Okay. So what things can a note contain? So first of all, we have to tell that this will be an entity. So using this annotation, so we have this entity annotation. Okay, it is just loading, and now you can see entity annotation, and we have to use that thing. So also import this, and inside this node, so what are the things a node can contain? So first of all, it can contain a file title. So there can be a title of a node, and that will be a string value, and also a description of a node. So description and string, and you can also provide here the tables column name for these two values. So using which we can just define here column info, and now inside of parentheses, now we can define the name of this column. So suppose I am writing here column title, and let me just copy this whole thing for my second one. So for this description, we have our column description, and these are the two columns. But how can we differentiate between two rows? So there might be a possibility that the user is defining the same title and same description for two different nodes. But how can we differentiate between them? So for that, we also have to add here a user ID, or we can say here a note ID. So we have to add here a primary key. So primary key will be a non-null value and also a unique value that will differentiate between our nodes. So we have to add here note I, and this will be an integer value. So this will be a primary key, and we also have to say auto generate true. Auto generate to true. Okay. So our first task is done, and we just created our entity. And after our entities, now we have to work with our DAO. So now we have to create a data access object, and I'm gonna add the same thing inside of this DB package. So this will be a Kotlin interface. So this DAO is an interface. Remember that thing, and I will just name it Note DAO. So we have to use here the annotation DAO, and this is a very handy thing that we can just define here annotations, and we can just tell our application that this is our entity, this is our DAO, this is our database. Okay, so just remember these annotations. So this is our data access objects, and inside this we can just define our functions to just get and to set our values inside of our database, inside of our table. So first of all we will add here a function to get all nodes, and this will just return us a live data of. So also have to import it. So what is this live data? So a live data object is just a wrapper around something that will just get real-time updates from our database or from our network. So we are going to get a list of nodes. So this list of nodes is a live data, and that means we are going to get real-time updates for our list of nodes. And if we are adding some new nodes, so we are going to get live data for that. Okay, and we also have to add here a query, because this is a query thing. We have to add here a SQL query command, because we have to query something from our database, and we have to add here a string value. So we have to get all data, select star from, and we have to get that from our this entity, and you can just add here entity name if you want. So inside these parentheses, you can just add here table name. Table name will be, suppose, notes table. Inside this, you can also define multiple parameters. You can just see indices, primary keys, foreign keys, and more things. So here we are just defining this notes table, and inside of this DAO, now I can define this value. So this is my first method that will just return us a live data for list of nodes. And after that, we also have to add here a suspend function, and suspend means we have to do something with our coroutines. And And why we are using coroutines? Because we can just do heavy operations like database query or database access on our main thread. So that's why we will be using our coroutines to do all these work inside of our background thread. So we have to add here add note, and this will just take a parameter of note, and it will not return us anything, and we have to annotate it with insert. So this is an insert operation, and there is also this query operation, and also we can add here suspend function for delete note, and we have to pass here a note value note. So we are gonna delete a particular note, this one, okay, and this will be a delete. So I hope now you understand all these methods, why this is a suspend function and why we are defining them inside of this DAO. And after that, now we have to define our database. So we just implemented these two things, entity and this DAO, and now it's time for our database. So let me just close this thing. So inside of this same DB function, we will be just creating a new Kotlin class, and that will be a Kotlin abstract class, and that is because we don't have to get the object of a database directly. So we are going to implement it as a data abstract class. Okay, so this will be our node database, and this is an abstract class, and we have to annotate it with database, and it also takes some values inside of these parentheses, and now you can see entities, and this is the arrays of something. So we have to define here entities. So this will be an array, and here we have to define our entities. That means our table. So a table will be note. There is only one table, note value. Okay, note colon colon class. And after that there is some error, and that is because we also have to define here this version. So this is also compulsory. So we have to define here the version of our database. Version will be 1, and now you can see the error is gone. So inside of this database, first of all, we have to get the instance of this DAO, and for that we are going to create here an abstract function. Function get DAO, and this will just return us a node DAO instance. Node DAO, and after that we have to create here an instance of database, and for that we have to use here singleton pattern to create the instance of our database, because this is a heavy operation and we only need one instance for our whole database, and we don't need to create instances of our database again and again, because this will just lead to our memory leakage inside of our application, and that's why we will be using our singleton pattern. So just write the code that I am writing here, and this will be a boilerplate code, so you can just copy this as it is for your database. So we are going to create a companion object, and this will be a block, and inside this first of all we need an instance. So instance variable, so this will be a type of our database. So our database is node database, so currently it will be nullable, and now we need the instance using a method. So fun, and the method name will be get database. And also one more thing, we also have to implement this, we have to extend the room database. And now for this get database method, we need to create the instance, and for that we also need the context value, where we need a context parameter. Okay, and now this will return as an instance. We import this, and the instance will be node database. So inside this we will return the instance if this is null. So if it is not null, then we are going to return this, and if it is null, then else we are going to create one. So synchronize block, because if there are multiple threads that are going to work with this database, so we need only one instance for all the threads. Okay, and we are not going to create multiple instances for every single thread. Okay, so inside this synchronized, so now first of all we need to create the instance here, and that will be using room dot data base builder. Okay, this is here room database. We need here room only. So room dot database builder. Let me import this. And inside this, first of all, we need to pass the context. So context dot application context. And after this, we need to pass this class. So the class name will be node database colon colon class dot java. And after that, the third parameter will be our database name. So what will be our database name? Node db. Okay. And that's it. So these are the three parameters. So now we can just call this, and now there will be a database instance inside this instance variable. So what we can do is instance, that is this value. So instance will be equal to this. Okay. Okay, why it is showing an error? Let me just copy this thing. Okay, at last we have to return something, and that will be this instance object. So both of these are same object, so we can just do, so we can just return any of them, and this should not be a value, it is a var, because we are reinitializing it. Okay, and that's it. So using this method, now you are creating a database instance, and that will be stored inside of this. So if this is null, then we are going to create one. Okay, and if we have previously already created, then we are going to store the instance inside of this private value. And after that, if we are again demanding the database instance, then we are going to directly return the previous instance. Okay, so this is it about our database. So now we just created our whole database, and after that, now let's just move to our MVVM architecture. So this is one cool diagram of our MVVM architecture, and let me just tell you, MVVM architecture is one of the most famous and recommended architecture that we have to use inside of our Android projects, and it is also very in demand skill that you should have. So what is an architecture? Architecture is something that you can say development practices that we have to use to implement to create our project. So there is some pattern that you have to use while creating your project, like this is your view and this is your view model. So there is some view like your activity, your fragment, and they have some views, right? And you can see there are some XML file, and after that you have some UI events, like when you are clicking, when you are scrolling, when you are fetching data from the internet, that we will be doing in our next video. Or you can say when you are getting access to your database, so that is also your UI event. So suppose you are storing some data inside of your database, so this is a event that is coming from your UI. So your UI is not going to directly talk with your database. This is not a good practice. Your UI have to talk with this view model class. So there will be a particular view model class that we have to use when we were creating our MVVM architecture. So there is a view model that will act as your data source, and every single thing that is associated to your view will be inside of this view model. And also this view model is gonna provide some classes like live data objects or anything that your UI can observe. So there is an observer pattern that we have to use between this view and view model. So there will be some things that the view model will be exposing, and our view have to observe these things so that our view can change these things accordingly. And this view model is considered as the intermediate and one of the most important layer inside of our MVVM architecture. And after that, our view model is going to directly talk with our repository. So what is a repository? So our repository is the whole, you can say, store where all your data comes. So our repository is going to talk with our local data source and our remote data source. So our repository is going to collect whole data from any resource, and it is going to combine everything inside of it. And our view models, so there can be multiple view models that can talk to one this repository. Okay, and this whole part, this repository and all the data sources is going to create our model. Okay, so that is why it is called as this model, view, and view model. So this is a MVVM architecture. Okay, and now you have to understand this flow, that first of all, when something have to show in our UI, so first of all we have to define that thing inside of our XML file, or suppose inside of your compose function that we will be also learning. So there is some screen and we are showing something inside of our XML file. And after that, suppose you are clicking on that thing. So what will happen on the click? So suppose there is some database action. So our view will just trigger some event for our view model. So suppose there is some function or something. So our view is going to trigger that function inside of our view model. So our view have one instance of view model. Okay. And suppose there is something to store in our database. So we are going to trigger that function inside of our view model. Okay. So a view model function is going to trigger, and after that, a view model is directly talking with our repository. So our view model is going to send a request to our repository. As you can see this flow. So if there is some UI event, then we are going to tell about this to our view model, and our view model is going to send the request to our repository. So view is going to talk with our view model, and our view model is going to talk with our repository. And after that, what a repository can do? So it can either send the request to our local data source, or it can send the request to our remote data source. So this is now the choice of our repository. So you can just write some logic that if there is some internet connection, then we are going to send the request to our remote data source, something that is on the internet. Or if there is no internet, then we can send the request to our remote local data source. So in this video, we are just going to learn about this thing, local data source. And in the next video, we are going to also learn about retrofit network data sources. So suppose there is some database action. Suppose we have to store something in our database. So we are going to send the data from our view to view model, and then view model will send the data to our repository, and our repository can just talk with our database and it can store the value. Okay. So you can just see this thing that it is receiving the data. And after that, our local data source can send a request back to our repository. So suppose there is some value that is returning from our function, and that will be just be here. And after that, this repository will also return some value, and you can just pass the value to our view model, and our view model can just show that thing inside of some observer value. And we can just set the observer pattern so that our view can observe everything inside of our view model, and it can just update the list or something that is happening inside of view. Okay. So that is how this MVVM architecture works. And now let's just create that thing. So first of all, till now what we have created is we have created our local data source, as you can see. So we just created our DB. So this is our local data source, and that is why I was saying that we have to create a package that will contain all our data. So our data contains our local data source as well as our remote data source. So this is our local data source that we just created these three values. So this is our domain object that is here note, because we are going to store a note inside of database, and this is the interface that we are going to use to access anything inside of our database, and this is our actual database class. And after that, now let's just create our repository. So this is our first level, this is our second, and after that we are going to create this view model, and after that we are going to update everything inside of our view. So now it's time to create a repository. But what is a repository? So a repository is a class that abstracts the access to multiple data sources. The repository is not part of the architecture component libraries, but is a suggested part. That means there is no class that we have to extend to create our repository, but it is suggested as a best practice for code separation and architecture. A repository class provide a clean API for data access to the rest of applications. So that means there is an interface that is our repository. So that means our repository is going to act as our interface, and we don't need to directly talk with our database, or we don't need some complex calculation if there is some internet or not, and this will be a part of our repository. But why we have to use a repository? A repository manages query and allow you to use multiple backends. In the most common example, the repository implements the logic of deciding whether to fetch data from a network or use results cached in our local databases. Okay. And now let's just create a repository, and that will be a Kotlin class, and we are going to name it as, so let me just create a Kotlin class, and we are going to name it Node repository. And this will be just a normal class, and this is going to take a parameter because our repository is going to talk with our database, and our database can be used by using this DAO, because these are the operations that we have to perform in our database. Okay. So that's why we need the instance of our DAO, not DAO, and this thing. Okay. And inside this, now let me just check what are the functions inside of our node DAO. So you can see there are these three functions. First of all, this query function. So get all nodes, and this is returning us a live data of list of nodes. But let me just note right here live data. We are gonna add here flow instead of using a live data, because flow is the latest thing that we can use. And after that, there is this insert method. Also, let me just add here on conflict strategy. So on conflict strategy dot, and here we can see ignore, because if there is any conflict, that means if we are adding multiple values, then there will be a conflict, and we have to also handle that thing. So when we are inserting, we have to add here on conflict strategy. Okay. And after that, there is this delete method, or we can also write here delete all, but that is not important. We are gonna just add these three functions. And let me just now add go back go back to our repository, and our repository can just get our database currently. So we are gonna add here a value all nodes, and this will be a flow object, and this will be just the same thing as our live data, but it will just get us the flow of all the data. So this will be a list of our node values. So node this thing, and now we are gonna get it from our DAO. So DAO dot, we are gonna get all nodes, and this value, this is our required type, that is flow of list of node, and we are returning here only list. So what we can do is we can just return here flow, and this will be from our coroutines. Okay. And now you can see there is no error. So this is our get value, that we are getting all nodes, and we also need to create a suspend function, and suspend means that we are going to use a coroutine to execute this function. So we can just do everything inside of our view model. So this will be a insert node. I think this is the same function, add node. Okay. So we can just add here insert node. So we are going to take a parameter of node, and what we are going to do is directly we have to talk with our node DAO dot insert node, and that's it. So you can see we are doing nothing here inside of a repository. But suppose if there are multiple data sources, then this will act as our API, this will act as our interface. Interface not actually means this will be an interface, but that means it will be an intermediate. So it is going to talk with our database, and we are going to only access this thing. So that's it. And we also have to write here, this will be our worker thread value. This task is on our worker thread. Okay. So this is all about our node repository, and now we have to create our view model. But what is a view model? The view model role is to provide data to the UI and survive configuration changes. A view model acts as a communication center between the repository and the UI. You can also use a view model to share data between multiple fragments. So if we are using fragments here, then we can also use view model to share data between them very easily. And also let me tell you one thing, that view model will just survive your configuration changes. So here we are just using one activity, and we will be using here, I think, different fragments to store our data. But suppose your activity will be just but suppose on configuration changes your activity is destroyed, so your data will still remain in your application, and that will be because of your view model. So on rotation event, your activity will be recreated, but your view model will just store all your data. So why we have to use a view model? A view model holds your app UI data in a lifecycle conscious way that survive configuration changes. Separating your app's UI from your activity and fragment classes let you better follow a single responsibility principle. So the single responsibility principle says that your activity or your fragment should only show your UI and should not do any hard calculations. So that is the task of your view model, and your view model will be responsible for all your calculation and for getting all your data, and your UI will just observe all that data, right? So your activities and fragments are responsible for drawing data to the screen, while your view model can take care of holding and processing all data that is needed for your UI. So just remember the thing about live data that I told you. So what is a live data? Live data is an observable data holder. You can get notified every time the data changes inside of a live data object. Unlike flow, live data is life cycle aware. So here we are using flow, and we will be converting this flow object into a live data because we need this life cycle aware component. Live data is life cycle aware, meaning that it will respect the life cycle of other components like activity or fragment. Live data automatically stops or resume observation depending on the life cycle of component that listen for changes. This makes live data the perfect component to be used for changeable data that the UI will use or display. So we have to use here live data, and we are going to observe our live data from our view model. The view model will transform the data from the activity from flow to live data and explore and expose the list of words as a live data to the UI. So here we have a flow, and this is in our repository level, but we are going to convert this flow of data into a live data so that we can just observe the data from our UI layer. Okay. This ensures that every time the data changes in the database, your UI will be automatically updated. So now let me just create a view model. So inside of new Kotlin, this will be a class, and I will just name it not view model. And we also have to extend some another class that will be view model class. Here you can see activity.lifecycle. So this will be a constructor call, and here inside this, so we have to talk with our repository inside of a view model. So we need that thing inside of our parameter, and our repository is going to talk with our database. So that's why we have this DAO inside of this repository parameter. Okay. So private val not repository, and that's it. Now we have to get all the data from our repository. So first of all, val all nodes. So this will be a type of live data of list of node. So this node, and we are going to get this from repository dot all nodes dot as live data. So you can see this is giving us an error currently, and that is because we don't have the specific implementation to change this all nodes that is a flow object to our this live data object. Okay, so we need to have the implementation of the dependency. Okay, so we will just add it here, and you can see this will be our first method, that is to get all the data from our DAO. So this is our get method, and we also have one insert method, so we will also implement it here. So this will be function insert node. Here we will have one node object. We need one node object, this, and this is going to return us nothing. So here inside of this, what we have to do, we have to call the repository function, and that should be on a background side now. So you can see this is a suspend function, so we have to execute that thing inside of a coroutine. So we are going to implement it here. So coroutine will be view model scope dot launch. So this will be our coroutine scope, and this is also not available currently because we have to add the dependency for this. So inside of a view model, if you have to execute something inside of a coroutine, then you can use this view model scope. And inside this, what we have to do, we have to call this repository dot insert node, and we have to pass this node just. So this will be another abstraction layer from our repository, and this time we have live data, so we can just observe this live data inside of our UI layer. Okay, so this is some separation of concern that you have to follow. And now let me just tell you about this view model scope. So in Kotlin, all coroutines run inside of a coroutine scope. A scope controls the lifetime of coroutine through its job. When you cancel the job of a scope, it cancels all coroutines started in that scope. So we have one scope, and inside this we can run multiple coroutines. The Android X lifecycle view model KTX library add a view model scope as an extension function of the view model class, enabling you to work with scopes. So we have to add the dependency, and let me just search for it. So life cycle view model KTX, because we need the Kotlin extension version. Let me just check what dependency I have already. So I have this core KTX, and the one I need is lifecycle view model. So this is lifecycle runtime, and this is lifecycle live data. So let me also copy this. So I will add it here, and also I need view model. So this is room KTX. I hope I have this room KTX. Let me just add it here. This is SQLite KTX, and this is lifecycle view model KTX. So let me just copy it, and I'm gonna paste it here. So this is for work manager, and that's it. So let me just sync it now, and hopefully we are gonna get both of these two dependencies. And now you can see Gradle sync is finished, and we have to now import this. So import, and also import. So here you can see lifecycle as view model as as live data, and lifecycle dot view model scope. And let me also import this launch function. Yeah, now you can see there are no errors. So let's just break down the code. So here you have created a class that is named Note View Model, that takes a Note repository as a parameter and extend view model. So the repository is the only dependencies that the view model needs. If other classes would have been needed, they would have been passed in the constructor as well. Suppose you have some another repository, then you can also pass it here, or any other uh, dependency for this view model. So this Note repository is now the dependency of this view model class. Okay, and after that we also added a public live data member, that is the that is a variable to cache the list of all the nodes. Okay, so this is the thing that we are directly getting from our node repository, and we initialize live data with all nodes flow object that we are getting from the repository. Then we have simply converted this flow to our live data by using this as live data. Okay, so after this, we added a wrapper insert node method that calls the repository insert method. This way, the implementation of insert is encapsulated from the UI. We are launching a new coroutine and calling the repositories insert, which is a suspend function, as I already showed you here. So this is a suspend function, and that's why we need a coroutine here. Okay. As mentioned, view models have a coroutine scope based on their life cycle that is called view model life cycle. So this thing, and we have to already import that thing inside of our build.gradle file, as you can see here. And after that, now we have to use this view model, but we cannot just create the object of this view model inside of a activity, and that is because activity will destroy on configuration changes, and we are going to create again a new object for our view model. But we don't have to do that. We don't need to create the object of our view model every time we trigger this on create method. Instead, what we can do is we can just follow best practices, and for that we need a view model factory. So 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 let me just also create here another class that will be our Note View Model Factory, and using this we can just pass here parameters. If there is no parameter for our view model, then you don't need to follow these things, but still you have to follow some best practices to get the object of this view model. Okay, so here we need this repository parameter, private val repository, and this will be a factory object. So view model provider dot factory, and inside this what we have to do, we have to call this cre uh, create function. So control and O, and you can see this create. So inside this what we have to do, so this will be used to create our object of this view model with the parameter of this repository. Okay, and now inside this, first of all check if this model class that is here as the parameter, model class dot is assignable from not view model class dot java. So these are the official Google best practices that you have to follow if you want to create an object of this view model. So this is a very simple thing and it is a boilerplate code. So you can also copy this thing as it is and just change the names. So if this thing is assignable from this and then we have to return the object of this view model object. Okay. So not view model and we have to pass this repository now. So repository as so and here you can see it return a t object, so we have to return here t. So this view model as t object. Okay, and else if this is not assignable, then we have to throw some exception. So throw illegal argument exception, and here we can just pass some message. So unknown view model class, and this should be this case. Okay, and now you can see this is our factory and we can just use this factory to create the object of our view model, and that's it. So this is all about our view model layer, and now we have to work on our UI layer. So this is our whole data layer. So our flow is going like this. So first of all we have to work on this view, and we just created our local data store using our room database. So this is our whole room database, and after that we created our repository using our best practices. So this is our repository and it only have two functions, insert and get, and I think we also have some delete function inside of our DAO, and we will also implement this thing later. Okay, so currently we only have two functions, that is insert and also get. And after that we also created our view model layer. So this is our node view model layer, and inside this we have our parameters. So we have to create a view model factory for this, and now we have to work on our UI layer. So this is our UI layer, and from our UI we are going to observe our live data from view model. Okay, so now let's just create our UI layer. And now for our each item we have to create our another layout that will be for our particular item, particular list item. So layout, and this will be a new layout, new layout resource file that will be named as recycler view item. Press enter, and we have to create here a layout particular column for our one item. Okay, so this is our title and this is our description, so that is fine, but we are not gonna work very good on our UI. You can also customize it by yourself, but the main task of this video is to show you MVVM architecture and store something inside of your local database in your phone. Okay, so we are not gonna extensively work on our UI. So now let's just go back to our main activity layout, and we are going to add here a recycler view, and I hope you already know about recycler view, so we are going to not explain about this here. So now you can see there is a plus option inside of this floating action button, and now this UI is just fine. So here we added two items, that is first of all this floating action button and then this recycler view. But to work this recycler view, we also have to add a adapter for this recycler view. So let me just create here new. So this will be a Kotlin class, and I will name it not list adapter. So now let me just create here recycler view, and we are gonna find view by ID. We have to pass here, this will be a type of recycler view, and here ID will be r.id dot recycler view. That's it. So we are also gonna get the adapter. Adapter will be nodes list adapter. This will be a constructor call, and there are no parameters inside of this adapter, as you can see here. So we got the recycler view, we got the adapter, and we have to set them with each other. Dot adapter value will be equal to adapter. So this is a set method, and we will also gonna set layout manager. Layout manager. So this will be a linear layout manager, and we are going to pass this as a context. Okay, so this is the whole process of creating. So this is the whole process of creating a recycler view, and we just created and added our recycler view to our list. And currently our application will not show anything to us because the list is empty, and we are only going to show our floating action button. As you can see, there are no items inside of our database, and that's why our list is still empty. So just wait for it to run, and you will just see an empty list and a floating action button. Okay, what is the actual error? Let me just find. This is saying here duplicate class present. Okay, I think there is some dependency issue. Let me check the database. So okay, we also have to pass here the export schema. Export schema. And after that, this is an abstract class. We have our DAO function. We have our companion get data. So let me run again. I think everything should be fine now, or just check your dependency. We have Kotlin kept, and I think we should also add Kotlin Android, but let's just wait if it works or not. It is not working, so let me just add one more plugin here. ID Kotlin kept, or Kotlin Android. Okay, this is the same thing, Kotlin Android or Kotlin Android, so we don't have to add. And what are the dependencies that we are adding here? So first of all, we have our room dependencies. So room ktx is here, and we should also have this room compiler. So I think these are copy of each other. So let me remove this. So we only need these things. First of all, we have our room ktx, that is the Kotlin extension library, and after that we have kept Kotlin compiler, and yeah, that's it. So after that, we will also have this lifecycle view model, lifecycle live data, and that's it. So I think now they should not return any copy because we were adding here multiple dependencies and they were same. So that's why they were showing here copy duplicate classes error, and I think they should work now. Let me check. It is still giving me error. So what we can do is build clean project, and we are gonna delete all the duplicate generated files, and let me rebuild it. It is again giving us the error of duplicate class. Let me just do one thing. So now let's just try to run it again, and if the error is still here, then we are going to search it on Stack Overflow. Our emulator is running and Gradle build is also running. Okay, the error is still here. And what is this saying? Task execution exception, duplicate class. Let me just copy this whole error, and we are going to search it. I think this is not the actual error, because this is not the error. Let me copy these lines. Okay, this is the error that we want. Okay, we have to add the version of this Kotlin Android. So this should be 1.8.8.0, and that's it. So let's now, and now Gradle build is almost done. So let me close this. Okay, let me try to run again. If the error is still here, then only thing we have to do is this invalidate caches and again build. Okay, now you can see Gradle build is finished and the activity is launching. So here is our application, and currently the list should be empty. Okay, you can see list is empty and we can see this floating action button. So that is the expected behavior. So now what we have to do, we have to work with our UI is going to work with our view model, and our view model need the instance of, to create our view model we need the instance of our repository, and for repository we need the instance of our database. So they should only exist once for our whole application, and now we have to instantiate our repository and our database. Okay, you want to have only one instance of the database and of the repository in your app. An easy way to achieve this is by creating them as a member of the application class. Then they will just be retrieved from the application whenever they are needed rather than constructed every time. So for that, create a new class that is called notes application that extend application class. So just right click on this folder, new Kotlin class, and that will be note application, and this should extend our application class. So this class is a class that also start before any of the activity. So this is the first entry point for our application, but this is not the thing that we are going to see in our UI. So first of all the code that is present inside of our application class is going to execute, and it will survive the whole life cycle of our application, whether it is our main activity or our activity second or our third activity. So the things, variables that are present in our application class will just survive our whole application instance. Okay, and then we can access them in any of the activity of our app. So this is our application class, and inside this we need two things. First of all, repository and database. So well, database by lazy. So what is this lazy? I will also tell you. And this is our node database, and after that we need the instance. So get database, and we have to pass the context. So this is the new context. Okay, and this is our database. So we also need the repository. So repository by lazy. What is this lazy? I will tell you shortly. Not repository, and there is no constructive method. This is a constructor call, and we have to pass the DAO. So database dot get DAO. So using the database, we can get the instance of our DAO, and we can directly pass it to our repository. So we need two instances here. Okay, and here you can see we have created a database instance and we have created a repository instance that is based on database DAO, because these objects should be only created when they are first needed rather than an app startup. So that's why we are using here Kotlin property delegation by lazy. So whenever we want the instance of this repository first time in our application, then only then we are going to call this constructor, and this is the work of our lazy property delegation. Okay, so this database and this repository will be not created when we are calling this thing, but instead they will be created when we are calling them by their name, like note application database. So when we are first time calling them, then only they will be created here. Okay, and if we are not using this lazy block, then they will be created when we are creating our application. So now that you have created the application class, update the Android manifest file and set application and set the name of this application. So you have to add here a name attribute, name, and the name is this note application. Okay, and now after all of this, now we have to populate the database. At the moment there is no data in our database, and you will add data in two ways. Add some data when the database is created, and add an activity for adding words. to delete all content and repopulate the database whenever the app is created, you will create a room database dot callback and override the onCreate. Because you cannot do room database operation on the UI thread, onCreate launches a coroutine on the IO dispatcher. Populating the database is not related to a UI lifecycle, therefore you should not use a coroutine scope like view model scope or something else. It's related to the app's lifecycle. You will update the application to contain application scope that passes through the database.getDatabase. So inside of our application class, before this, what we need is a application scope. So well application scope, and that will be our coroutine scope that we are going to create here. Coroutine scope, and inside this, what we have to pass? We have to pass here supervisor job. So supervisor job, and that's it. And here we are going to pass this application scope inside of our get database method. So here pass application scope, and inside of our get database method, so here take this as a parameter, scope of coroutine scope. So in this database, you will create a custom implementation of room database dot callback method. That also gets a coroutine scope as a constructor parameter. Then you will override the onCreate method to populate the database. So now let's just create a class of database callback. So this will be a private class, and that will be named as not database callback, and it takes coroutine scope as a parameter, private well scope of coroutine scope, and this is a class that will implement room database dot callback, and now that's it. So let me move this redundant, and inside this, let me just override this on create. And here, this is the block where we will be using this scope. So what we are gonna do is, after this, we need the instance. So this is a save call. So if this instance is not null, then what we are gonna do is with this database, first of all, we are gonna launch a coroutine, and then we are gonna populate the database. Populate database, and here we are gonna pass the DAO. So get DAO, and okay, this is it here. So I will write here db, and we are gonna call here db.getDAO, and now it will work. So we also need this populate database method, and we are gonna create it here inside of this class. So this will be a suspend function because this is a heavy operation that we are populating our database. So this should only work inside of a coroutine, and the name is populate database. And inside this, we have our DAO operation, the DAO object. So this is a node DAO, and what we have to do is, first of all we have to clear all this. So we have to delete all. So for that, we can just add a method, or let me just add a method. So inside of our DAO, we can add a method that will be a suspend function. So delete all, and it will just return us nothing, and the query should be on this will be delete everything from our database. So our database table name will be notes table, and that's it. So we will call this method dot delete all, and after this, we are gonna add a note. So note will be equal to a note value, and it takes some parameters, and First of all, suppose id is 0, then title is title, and this is description, and we are gonna call here now dot third note is note, and we are gonna again do this thing. So we are gonna create here another object, another title. So this thing. So we added the two elements inside of our database. And now what we have to do, we have to call this. Okay, what is this error? Okay, this should be launch. And what we have to do before calling this build, we have to add here the callback. So dot add callback, and we have to pass here this not database callback. So not database callback, and inside this pass this scope, and that's it. So Control Alt and L so that you can format your code, and that's all about our database. So we can just initialize our database when it is created, or you can say where we are populating our database. And after this, so now after getting the reference to our database and repository, we have to create our new activity so that we can enter our new node inside of our database. So for that, we will be creating a new activity. So right click on this package, new, and this time we will create an activity that will be empty activity, and we are going to name it new note activity, and we also have to generate a layout file. So click on finish, and first of all we have to work with our layout. So our layout will be linear layout because we just need three things: two edit text and one save button. So this will be a linear. Okay, it is loading layout. So we have to select this, and the orientation should be vertical, and this time we have to use to edit text so that we can enter values inside of it. So first one is used to enter title, and the second one will be for our description. So height will be match parent, and which should be match parent, and height will be wrap content. And you can also give here hint title for your note, and also give it id. So id will be edit text ed title, and you also have to give some margin. So you can just do it inside of this layout, margin 20 dp. So that looks fine, and this will be this should be a string resource. So let me just extract, and why it is still showing here warning. Okay, we have to add this attribute also, autofill hint. So let me copy this thing now. Why it is again still showing this warning? Input type. So input type should be, so input type is text, and also for this, let me copy this attribute, and here the id will be description, and this should also have some margin top, suppose 10 dp, and that looks fine. So for hint, let me just add here this is description. Okay, so why it is not showing here? We extract this as string resource, and after this we also need a button. So add a button here, so with wrap content, and it should be also wrap content. And after this, let me just set the gravity, layout gravity to center, and I should also give it a ID, button, save, and this should also have a text, and this will be save. So that's it for our button, and I think we should also give it a margin top and also extract this string resource. Okay, so now everything is working fine, and this is a decent UI. You can change this UI according to yourself. And I think we should also provide here max lines 1 for our title. Okay, and I think you can just modify everything by yourself after this. So this is a normal UI, and after this what we have to do inside of our this new note activity. So inside of this new note activity, so first of all inside this we need the reference to our edit text. So val our title edit text is a type of edit text, and we have to use here find view by id, find view r dot id dot, this is ed title, and after that same thing for our description edit text, and here the id will be the description. So now our third value is here button, so save button, and also find view by id. We can define here this is a button, r dot id dot button save, and now we have to set a click listener on this button. So button dot set on click listener, and inside this what we have to do, first of all we need to get a intent. So val reply intent, so we need to send intent back to our first activity, and we are going to navigate from this activity to our new note using that fab button. So inside of our layout we have this floating action button, and when we are clicking on this floating action button we are going to navigate to this new note activity, and we are going to also send intent back to our main activity. So this will be a empty intent, also import this thing here, and now what we have to do is we have to pass these two values from our these two edit tags inside of this intent. Okay, so first of all check if this value is empty or not. So if, so we can just use this text utils dot is empty, and we have to pass here this title edit text dot text. So if this is empty, and also this description is also empty. So if title is empty and description is empty, then that means we know that user just, so we don't have to set any value inside of our intent now. So what we have to do is we have to set the result for this intent to be activity dot, so here you have to pass this result cancelled. So we are starting this activity to get a result back, and this time if our values are empty, so that means the result is cancelled, and we are going to pass here this reply intent. And else if there is any value inside of our title or inside of our description, then that means we have to set here title and also description. So title will be title edit text dot text dot toString, and that is because this is the editable value, right? So here we got the title and we need the description also. So description edit text dot toString. So now we have the title and description, and now we have to add that value to our reply intent. So reply intent dot put extra. So here we have to add some extra value, and for this we can just create here a companion object, and so we are gonna create here two constant values. So first of all, this will be title reply, and you can just add here any value. Suppose I am adding some random string, and this will be description reply, and you can also add here some random string value. Okay, so here first of all, for our title reply we have to add this value, title, and our second value will be, we have to also again put extra. Our description reply will be this description. So we just pass two values inside of our this intent, and now we have to set our reply, set reply, and now this time our result is activity dot result. Okay, and this time we have to also add this, and after this we also have to finish our activity. So when we are clicking on our button, then that means we are going to set intent and also finish our activity. Okay, so that is the task of this whole activity, and now we have to connect with our data. So the final step is to connect the UI to the database. By saving new notes, the user enters and displaying the current content of the word database in our recycler view. To display the current content on the database, add an observer that observes the live data from our view model. Whenever the data changes, the onChanged callback is invoked, which calls the adapter setWords method to update the adapter's cache data and refresh the displayed list. So inside of our main activity, first of all, you have to get an instance of our view model, and here we are gonna get it here. Private val our node view model, and this is a type of node view model, and here we are gonna use this by view models TLS, and this will be a block, and I think it is not recognizing. I think we should have to add some dependencies. First of all, let me just write here this node view model factory, and inside this we have to pass what value do we have to pass? A repository. So we know that we can get the instance of our repository from our application class inside this, as you can see. So we can just pass here application as our node application, and we are gonna get here dot repository. So we got the instance of our repository, and using this factory we can get the instance of our view model. And let me just check what dependency do I have to add here. Let me just check inside of this build.gradle, and here we have our lifecycle live data ktx. We have our view model ktx, and we have room ktx and room compiler. I think we have all the necessary dependencies that are required. So why it is not giving us here this view model? So let me just check it on Stack Overflow. So I will just copy this thing, and we are gonna search it on Stack Overflow. So this is our activity ktx and fragment ktx that we also have to add here. So we are using here currently activity, so we are gonna only add this dependency. So inside of our build.gradle, so we are gonna add our dependency here, and the version should be, so let me try here 1.4.0. So I will just update it here. Okay, and now sync now. So this time we will get this thing, and after that what we have to do? So now let me just import this thing. And after this, so here to create the view model, you have used this view models delegate, passing in an instance of our view model factory. This is constructed based on the repository retrieved from our this notes application. Okay, so the onChange method fires when the observed data change and the activity is in the foreground. So we have to set here an observer, and that will be our note view model dot all notes dot observe. So we can observe because this is a live data object, right? And here inside this we can just pass here owner. Okay, we have to pass here owner equal to this. And after this, why it is showing here an error, let me remove this. So now it will return us a list of notes, and here I will write here notes, and I will use here notes dot let. So inside this I will just call my adapters function, adapter dot submit. So submit list, and this will be it. So let me just write it in the next slide, and I hope you understand this thing now. You want to open a new note activity when we are tapping on the fab button, and once we are back in the main activity, to either insert the new word in the database, or we can also show a toast message. So to achieve this, we can just start by defining a request code. So I will just define it here. So private val new note activity result code, and suppose this will be 1. In this activity, now we have to add the on activity result code for the new note activity. If the activity returns with result okay, then we will insert the return note into the database by calling the insert method of our view model. So here I will just override this method, override on activity result, and I will just use this method. So after this line, so this method is deprecated, but it will still work fine. So if our request code that is inside of this param, so if our request code is our new note activity request code, and our result code is equal to activity dot result okay. So if the result is okay, then what we have to do is we will just get this data. So this should be not null. So we can just get this extra. So get string extra that we just passed from our previous activity, and we are gonna just use the static value that we just created there. So new note activity dot, and first of all we are gonna get the title. So this should be also not null. So dot let, and inside this now we will only get non-null value. So well, let me just create this word outside of this. Well, not equal to not, and inside this we can just pass here some random values, and we are going to update it. And this time we will update this title. So title will be our it, and I think this is a val, so we cannot override it. So instead, what we can do is we can just get here this string title of type string, or we don't have to define it. So this will be first null, and I can just get it like this. And I can just do the same thing with our title description reply. And I can also create another variable named this description, and I'm gonna update it. So after this, what I can do is I can just here I will create a new note value. So note, and I can just pass this title and this description. And I think it is also asking for ID. So what we can instead do is we can just remove this primary key as an integer. And what we can do is we can just make this string title as our primary key. So this title is also our primary key, and this we should not auto generate this time. Okay. And now let me close this. So now this time it will work. And I think now we should also change inside of our database right here. Okay, I think there is no error now. So after this, what we have to do is we have to call our view model function. So I will just call not view model dot insert. So this time I have to insert this note, and now it will insert this note inside of our database. And else, if this value is null, if our result is not okay, then what we have to do, we can just show a toast message. Toast dot make text, and I can just pass here application context, and the second value will be, I can just define here some string empty value, and after that the length should be toast dot and dot. So we are going to show a toast if our result is not okay, and that's it. So we have to now create a on click function inside of this on create method. So get the instance of this fab. This is a type of floating action button. Find view r.id.fab and set a on click listener. Here this one. And inside this, what we have to do, we have to start our new activity. So create an intent, and this intent should be new intent, and this time we are gonna pass here this, and second value will be our new activity, new note activity colon class dot java. And after this we have to start our activity for result. Start activity, but it should be for result so that we can get our result back. Start activity for result. This method is also deprecated, but it will work for our task. And here we have to pass our code. So our code is new note activity result code, and that's it. So what error it is showing here? Okay, this method is here set on long click, but we need set on click. Okay, so this time everything is fine now. So now let's just try to run our application, and this time everything will work. Okay, it is showing us an error, and is for our delete all method, delete all from our table. So what we can do is we can just remove this method. Should be not present inside of our database. It is being used here, but what we can do is we can just remove this populate database method. and on create you don't need to do anything, so just remove this callback also, remove it from. So I think everything should work now. And for our repository we don't have any remove method. Okay, so you can just add a remove functionality. What you can do is you can just create a delete button inside of our resource layout and recycler view item. So you can just add a delete button inside of this particular row item, and by clicking on that delete button you can just perform a delete operation inside of our database, right? Okay, okay, it is again giving us an error, and this is in, this is some compilation error, and let me just check the line. Okay, here we can just compare the title value, title and title. Now this time there is no error. Let me check again. Let me just close all these files here, and this time hopefully our application will run without any crash. So if there is any crash, then we can check it inside of our logcat. Okay, it is installing our application, and that means there is no build error. So let us just see if there is any runtime error or not. So launch is succeeded, and let us check this logcat side by side. Our application is started, and yeah, it is working. So you can see currently the list is empty, and when we are clicking on this plus button, so we are navigating to our new note activity. Here we are gonna add a title. So I'm gonna write here my note title, and for the description, some random description. So when we are clicking on the save button, it is performing our database operation. And okay, it is not shown here. As you can see, now it is present here. So that means our database operation is successful. And what you can do is you can just press on this home button, and when you are again opening the application, you can just see there is this note already present. So let me just close this application now. So I'm also gonna remove it from background. I'm gonna open it again. So the name of our application was room MVVM. As you can see, the note is still present here. So let me just try to add multiple notes. So if I am adding another note, second note, description is, just click on save. And this is our first note, and here is our second note. So you can also try to change configuration. And here you can see the data is still here. So our UI is working fine, and our data is also surviving the configuration changes. So that is it for today, everyone, and in our next video we will be working with our remote data source, and we will be fetching our data from our network. So thank you for watching.